So what got you into go-kart racing?
Basically, I was pretty much born at a racetrack, almost born at a racetrack. My dad raced ovals in the UK. It's nothing at all like what you see here in North America, like NASCAR and IndyCar. It's a lot smaller, real small oval racing. It's cheap and cheerful. And my dad done that because he's been a motorsport fan all his life. Done trials bikes when he was younger as well. So my dad was actually on the grid, ready for the final. He'd won his heat race that day when my mum actually went into labour at the track.
Wow.
So she got rushed to the ambulance and taken to hospital. And I was born, and my dad literally held me wearing his race suit. So the first time he held me, so I was kind of born to go racing. And then so I grew up watching my dad race until I was around 6 or 7, and he knew of kart racing because he'd done a volunteer as a flagger and stuff in this local series back in the UK where I was from. And he looked at that series up, and they were still racing, so he got my cousin into it to make sure I enjoyed going to the races, which obviously I did. I love going to watch him, so I love going to kart tracks as well. And that was it. For my 7th birthday, I got my first kart, a used cheap kart, and actually run away from it crying when my dad started the engine up the first time. And then basically when you're 8 years old, you can start racing. So I was 8 on a Wednesday. First race was the Saturday afterwards, and that's how I got into it. And that's been my life up until now, and it still is part of my life, racing in karts, you know.
Wow, that's really great. So how long have you been racing exactly?
So I started driving in 97, and I started racing in 1998. So I don't know how many years that is, over 20 years now for sure.
Oh, wow. So we watched this YouTube video, and that's one of the reasons we're able to find you.
Yeah.
And in the video, you mentioned that you were a 3-time world champion. Does this mean that you travel around the world for karting, or is it like just in Canada, or?
Yeah, so the first 10 years or so of my racing, I don't know, maybe a little bit less, 8 years of racing, it was just in the UK. So traveling all around the UK, doing the British Championships, these sort of races. And in 2006, actually no, 2004, so I went out and done a couple of European Championship events. We started traveling different places in Europe, Italy, France, or stuff like that. And yeah, and up until probably 2007, 2006, I was mainly in Europe, and I managed to qualify for the World Championships for the category I was racing in. So the first time I actually went was in 2005 into Malaysia. So we actually flew to Malaysia for the World Championships, and then yes, from that moment on, I pretty much travelled all over the place. We went to the United Arab Emirates, Dubai and stuff, and raced there. I've been to Indonesia, I've been to Japan. So literally travelled all over the world, come here to North America, done racing in the US and Canada. So yeah, it really is a worldwide sport, and the way the governing body works, everyone pretty much uses the same categories. So it's one of the biggest categories in the world is road tax. And that's what I end up winning the World Championships in. And there's series for that category in every single country, pretty much all over the world. So that's where the winners of every series in the national series qualify for the World Championships. And in the end of the year, you go to the World Championships and race against 50-something other countries and represent your country and try and win the race, basically.
So obviously, car racing takes up a lot of your time. So
yeah.
as a successful racer, winning like several championships, are you able to do this full time, or do you have another job whatsoever? Or?
Yeah, I'm now full time working in kart racing, and there's a lot of people that can do that now, working in karting, whether it's as a coach, as a mechanic, working at a kart track, working at race teams. It's become a very professional sport. So for the moment, I was maybe 15 when I actually started working in a sport, coaching young kids and so on. And that's where I sort of followed the path. I kind of went into trying to be a coach and an instructor, and that's what brought me here to Canada, to Quebec. I was racing against a driver, and his dad owns a couple of tracks here, which I now work at. And he knew of me, and sort of approached me with the idea about starting an academy up and trying to get new people into the sport. Because that's always the biggest issue with kart racing, is getting new people into the sport, and for people to understand what kart racing is, not what go-karting is. You know, go-kart is fun, that you pay your $20 and you go have fun with your friends and stuff. Kart racing is a professional sport. So we started an academy up that way and trying to get new people in. And about 4 years ago, we started up with 6 drivers, and we're now at 28 drivers. So the academy is growing huge here in the Montreal area. And we're literally starting from doing a small half-day course or a summer camp up until they get into our academy, which is full time. They need to have their own kart. We take them to their first race, and then now we've got drivers that are going into the US and things. Obviously not now during this time, but in past winter, there was in the US racing. We've had drivers go to the World Championships and things now. So yeah, there's a huge opportunity to continue working in the sport, because like I said, there's lots of different opportunities to work, and even data engineers now looking at the data on the karts and things. It's a hugely professional sport.
Yeah. So are only like the top racers able to do this full time, or would you say most kart racers are able to?
So I'd say if you were to try and race as a job full time, yeah, only really the top drivers. I was a factory driver for maybe 7 or 8 years, and didn't actually get a salary, but everything was free. And then I got to coach with drivers in the team, and that's where I kind of got the salary from it. So only if you want to race, you kind of have to be a top level driver. But if you just want to work inside the sport, you just need to be good at what you're doing, basically, whether it's mechanic on the kart. If you're good with your hands and being a good mechanic, that's one thing we're so short of in the sport, is good mechanics and know what they're doing. So if you're a good mechanic and understand mechanics and mechanical things, then that's great. If you're a good coach, then you can become a coach. You don't necessarily need to be a good driver. There's a lot of drivers that know what to do, but not necessarily have the talent of doing it themselves. But they know, and they're great at teaching the drivers how to do it and what to do. So there's lots of different options, whether it's buying and selling in the sport, buying karts, selling new karts on things. There's lots of different things.
Cool. So one thing we were kind of wondering is there seems to be this misconception around people that go-karting is only for kids and families at theme parks, and we were wondering if you could talk about the nature behind professional go-karting and the seriousness behind it.
Yeah, so a bit like I said, the biggest thing I always use this reference when I was a kid, going to the hairdressers or the barber shop, getting my hair cut with the local barber. He knew I was racing and things, and he'd always say to me, here you do go-kart racing. I've done that the weekend down with my family and friends, and we had some fun doing it. And they think what I was doing and what I do is fun go-kart racing, and it's what we do it's kart racing. It's a real sport. And there's a huge amount of professionalism in it. For example, we just had a race this past weekend at Mont Tremblant. Under the tent, I had almost 30 drivers. I had 10 staff with me, coaches, instructors, data analysts, technicians, designing, working out what to set up the karts and things. And obviously, it's still the entry-level to motorsport. But it's the cheapest way of getting into motorsport, and you can spend a lot of money doing it. You can also spend not so much money doing it, and it doesn't matter. You can still be competitive either way. So that's the biggest conception, is when you go and say I race karts, everyone thinks they do that when they come and pay their $20 and go out 10 minutes with their friends and family. Racing real karts is completely different. They're literally mini Formula Ones. They're 100 and something pounds, capable of a 6-speed shifter is capable of 160 kilometers an hour. When you're inch off the ground, they're ridiculously fast. Here at the track I work at, we have a drag strip with cars race up and down, and we've dragged a shifter kart next to a Ferrari and beating it off the line and beating it on the quarter mile. So they are completely different realms of the sport. But at the same point, they do kind of link, because go-kart racing, rental karts, is a good, easy way of, I like doing this, so getting into karting, and then you can see the racing side from it afterwards. So they both work together, but it's very important to keep the distance between the two, that kart racing is a professional sport and go-kart racing is more of a fun hobby thing to do with your family and friends.
Yeah, oh, cool. So that kind of leads into my next question, actually, because when we were interviewing other race car drivers, we interviewed James Hitchcliffe.
Yep.
And all of them mentioned that they actually started with go-kart racing. And so is that something you're interested in too? It's moving on to IndyCar or NASCAR or something like that?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm getting on a bit now for that. I'm 30, so I'm not sure if I'm ever going to be getting into that. But I done my first ever car race last year, and ultimately, to make the next step in, you need to have contacts, budget behind you, sponsoring and things. And I personally that's just me, never really good at going and knocking on doors and asking people to give me money. I was very lucky to be supported in kart racing and become a factory driver and things like that. But I never felt comfortable to go out and ask for people to give me money so I can go car racing. But sure, if somebody was to come and knock on the door and say, I'm willing to pay for you to go racing, I'll take it up. But yeah, I guess it's kind of always stayed a bit of a dream there. But now my that's kind of led on with my academy. The next step is to go into car racing, so from karting to cars. So we'll have a link from kart racing to cars and so on. But yeah, maybe I'm a bit too old at the minute and don't necessarily have the budget to go the next step up.
So you mentioned in the video that we watched that many pros in like F1, IndyCar, and NASCAR, they come back to race karting.
Yeah.
And one of our former interviewees, LP Dumoulin, he races in the NASCAR Pinty series. He told us that due to COVID, his series currently isn't running, and he actually goes go-karting to stay competitive. So I was curious, like, have you ever raced against any like professional race car drivers while you were karting?
Yeah. Like he spoke about James Hinchcliffe a few years ago. I raced him in Florida. My teammate was Carlos Sainz Jr. So I've been around lots of drivers that have been in Formula One, and not necessarily NASCAR because it's a slightly different style of racing compared to kart racing and things. But yeah, like I was in paddocks when they were all younger than me at that stage, but I was in the senior category. In the junior category was Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, Lando Norris. All those guys are in Formula One now. We all grew up in the same paddock, the same tracks. Obviously, I was in a different category because I'm older than them. But a few years ago, Stoffel Van Dorn was racing in Formula One. I was racing against him. So yeah, we have I've raced against a lot of professional drivers and still see them. Like you said, they come back to track and drive. LP, he comes to Tremblant where I work as well. I've seen him kart racing last year and stuff, driving around, just keep himself in shape. The track at Tremblant's owned by Lawrence Stroll, so Lance Stroll's dad. He quite often comes every summer during their summer break in Formula One and drives a kart just to keep himself in shape. And they've always said that a shifter kart gives this closest sort of reality to Formula One. Although the speed isn't the same, but the sensation of being so close to the ground, they say it's the same sort of sensation as driving in Formula One. So you do see a lot of drivers jump back into karting because of that feeling. Basically, it's the closest thing you can get, and it's the purest form of karting, motorsport.
Yeah, you also mentioned in the video that go-karting should be nationally televised. Do you still believe this? And if so, how can it become a nationally televised sport?
Yeah, so I still 100% believe this. Back then when that video was done, we had an Eastern Canadian karting series. So we had 2 races here in Quebec, 2 races in Ontario. And it was really big. Unfortunately, the economy hit and the numbers dropped. So both regions have stopped doing that series now. And we do our own regional series and try and build our sport up that way. And then we have 1 national championship every year. And I do believe that maybe each region should have their series on TV. And then the nationals should be on, say, TSN or whatever. When I first raced here in 2012, our national championships was on TSN. And I know it was really well supported and a lot of people watched it. Ultimately, it comes down to the support and the finances behind it to bring the TV camera crew there and so on. But what tends to happen whenever you see things like that covered on TV is that they take 6 or 7 laps of each race. And what I'd like to see it is you follow a series, like a category through the year, so the people can relate to the drivers, whether it's the kids or the adults or whatever, they can relate to the drivers and follow that one series during the year. What they tend to do now is try and cover every single category in the event, so you don't always see exactly what's going on. So I'd like to see it done, but ultimately it comes down to getting the right sponsorship, right people in place to be able to film it.
In comparison, what are the risks of like go-kart racing versus like street racing?
So obviously, like it's like all sports, especially motorsport, everything's dangerous. I can say the worst thing I've ever seen is a broken collarbone. Like you can obviously have broken bones in pretty much anything you do. So that's the best way to relate it to other things. You can walk down the stairs and trip and break your foot or leg. Same sort of thing. Like I said, the worst thing I've seen in kart racing is a broken collarbone. We have all the safety equipment, helmets, our race suits, gloves, and boots are all there to be designed to be not fireproof, but to be tear-proof. So they don't rip in case you come out of the car. They don't rip apart. So it keeps you safe that way. Whereas if you're on the street, you kind of only got the safety equipment that's around you in the car. So you don't have a helmet, you don't have the right safety gear, you don't have a 5-point harness and things like you should do in a race car. So there are huge differences that way. Yeah, safety as always comes as number one in any sport you do, especially in kart racing and motorsport. When you're street racing, safety I don't think comes as number one priority.
Yeah, I hear that. So like what's your opinion on street racing? How does that make you feel?
So it's something I've never done. It's something I've never really felt like I needed to do because I was always racing. I was kart racing. At the weekends, I'll be off and racing. So when I started driving, I never really thought about going fast. In the UK, the speed limit's 70 miles an hour. You drive at 80 miles an hour on the highway or the motorway, like you call it in the UK. But I never felt the need to go faster than that. I was doing more than that on the track at the weekend. So it never really bugged me. And for me, the thrill for going fast wasn't always at the front of everything. It was the thrill of racing. I love the competition of racing against other people. 30 guys on the track. That's what got me going. So I don't think street racing maybe gives you a buzz if you've not been used to kart racing or not been exposed to a real race, shall we say. But once you'd ever try in a proper go-kart race or kart race, you'll definitely forget about the whole street racing thing because it's nothing like racing against 30 other people in karts.
So many professional drivers have told us they feel safer on the track than on the street, such as like Hinchcliffe and like a lot of these guys that we interview. Do you feel the same way?
100%. Like on a track, everybody's going the same way. Everyone's doing the same racing line to an extent. It's more predictable on a track. Everyone knows what their goal is to do the same thing. Whereas street racing, you can't really control, other than say you're racing one other person, you can't really control the general pedestrians or other people in cars that could come in the other way. So for sure on a track, I feel way safer than if I was in a car. There's zero comparison. There's no words put into to describe it really. That kart racing, motorsport, in a professional way, you've got officials, you've got flaggers. If there's an accident ahead, someone's waving the yellow flag, you see it in front of you. If someone's hurt, there's a red flag coming out. If you're on the street, there's none of that, right? So you don't know what's around the next corner. You don't know if there's a crash or a spin, a bus sitting there loading up with school kids. You have no idea, right? So it's completely different realms, and 100% I feel way safer in a real kart race or racing like us with officials and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. So kind of as a last question, do you think go-karting is a good alternative for people who have a need for speed as opposed to obviously them driving dangerously on the road?
Yeah, 100%. Like I can only go off of my experience. And like I said, I've never felt the need to speed on the road because I've always raced. I've never felt the need to try and, race them off the lights or anything like that because it's kind of pointless to me. Racing is for a track and against 30 other people on the track. That was always my thing. So yeah, I think if it can be published well and promoted well enough, for sure, going go-kart racing, whether it's a professional kart racing or league races with rental karts that cost a few $100s every month or whatever to do a proper league race with 40 or 50 other drivers. If they can be promoted well enough and publicized well enough, then for sure it's going to help the whole street legal street racing and things like that.
Yeah. So I think that's all the questions. Sorry, since I did like out Javon, did we get all the questions that we needed?
I think the only one we missed was the precautions they take.
Yeah, do you want to ask that?
Sure. Yeah, we were curious. So what are some precautions that they take for go-kart tracks to keep the racers safe?
So some of the things they do to keep the track safe around the track.
Yeah.
So all our tracks, you have a lot of runoff. So on every exit of every corner, you have minimum 10, 15, 20 feet of runoff. You have curbing. So you have the inside curb, outside curb. So the limits of the track. It's all painted white lines, so the limits of the track. Here at iCar track, it's all concrete. So if you run off, you still got grip when you run off track. At Tremblant, it's grass and things like that. And then after the runoff, you either have tire barriers or plastic barriers. They're all designed and in place in a certain way that it's safe. So even if you do crash into them, you might hurt yourself a little bit or bend the cart or whatever the case would be. But to go where the tire barriers are or the plastic barriers are, it takes a hell of an effort to get that sort of thing. So there's all these different things like that. There's all the rules when it comes to races, the flag signals. You have, the races, we have a clerk of the courses that give people penalties if they're not doing the right thing. You have black flags if someone's acting badly on track, warnings. So there's all these different things in place. Regulations like you have to put your hand up when you come in the pits, so somebody's coming in the pits in front of you, so you're not surprised. All these different things like that mean that when you drive at a track, it's a hell of a lot safer than driving on the road.
It was great having you on.
No problem.
I don't really think there's anything else to touch upon, but thank you for joining us here.
No worries, guys. If you need anything, just let me know.